the hour and we can get started. I believe I have the green light just to go with it, so I will go ahead and do that. I just got to figure out how to share my screen. All right, you can all see my screen. Okay, great. Before I dive in, brief, I guess, word of warning. This is my first time really presenting using Zoom, so something might go wrong. It's also my first time presenting for a book club, so I'm still learning, the right balance between just regurgitating what the chapter tells us and like adding my own opinion. So I apologize if it's a little heavy-handed either way. But we're covering chapters 6 and 7 this week. I'll go through 6, then we'll go through 7. Feel free to ask questions or make opinions at any time. You don't feel like you need to wait till the end. Okay, and I think we're ready to roll. So chapter 6 is all about visualizing amounts, counts of things, numbers of things. And this chapter really focuses on the bar plot or bar chart. Basically, all bar charts in their simplest form have a numerical or a quantitative variable, typically on the y-axis. Here we have millions of US dollars. And on the x, you have your categorical factorial kind of data. So we have different movies here on the x. And then the height of the bar represents the magnitude of the quantitative variable. So pretty simple. I think we've all encountered those out in the wild. But what makes a bar chart ugly or bad or possibly wrong in the kind of nomenclature that the author has provided really comes down to two things. One is the rotation of the, one is actually the axis labels down here. These are the axis labels for the x-axis. The author finds that when you have very long axis labels and bars that are very close together, you often have to rotate them to get them to not clip into one another. But he finds rotating to be ugly, and I think I agree with him at least a little bit. But you can basically rotate these from their, I guess, 0 degree angle to up to 90 degrees. It looks like they're 45 or something here. But he says that's ugly. What he finds is a better alternative is to rotate the plot. And this way, the words Star Wars, Jumanji, Pitch Perfect are just like we would read them on the page. There's less mental effort and kind of head rotating to make sense of the plot. And you can still interpret the magnitude of your quantitative variable the same way, like it's a one-to-one mapping. What the author didn't suggest, and this is something I found works some of the times, is wrapping labels. This is a graph I created. If they're short, you can wrap them. If for some reason you need to maintain a non-flipped perspective. So this chapter is all about bar plots, and how to make a good bar plot in the author's mind really seems to come down to, or at least what he mentioned, was the axis labels, which we've covered, and the orientation of the bars, or the ordering of the bars, rather. If your data, the categorical variable you're using, has a natural order, like age categories, or I'm trying to think of another one off the top of my head, like a Likert scale, very unlikely, possibly unlikely, somewhat likely, unlikely, very likely, somewhat likely, very likely. I'm not sure if that's a true Likert scale, but something like that where there's a clear ordering, that you should use that ordering and not do what he's done here, which is order your categories by their value in descending or ascending order, because it just breaks the natural progression of categories on the x-axis. But if your data doesn't have any natural order, if you're polling people for your favorite colors and red is not necessarily after or before blue, you can just sort those by descending value, which might look something like that. I don't know if this really made sense, but I'll throw it out there. This is something I was kind of scanning earlier in the book, and the author said that bar charts like this have to start at 0. Their y-axis in most cases needs to include 0, which I think tracks with me that it would be misleading to show a bar chart that doesn't start as 0 because you're counting from 0. But then I was wondering, like, would a bar chart make sense for something like a ratio where maybe like a ratio that doesn't necessarily start at 0, at least in the way that we use it in the real world? That's a half-baked idea. Maybe we can come back to that if we're, really struggling to find something to talk about. But to keep going on with bar charts, the next subchapter, 6.2, was all about how to basically cram more information into a bar chart. This is typically another categorical variable. You can use an aesthetic like color, as he's done here, to break up the categorical x-axis into different groups, where the different levels of another categorical variable are colored in different bars in different colors within that group. So we have different races here: Asian, white, Hispanic, black for the 15 to 24 age category, and so on and so forth. This is sometimes a little overwhelming to the eye. It's just a lot of information to take in. It's 4 by 7, so 28 different bars. It's a lot to understand. Sometimes it works, but you also need to make sure you're delivering the message you want. When using a grouped bar chart, you have to make a conscious decision about what categorical variable is on your X and what categorical variable is on your color aesthetic. Because here with age on the X-axis, we're emphasizing maybe differences among races within certain age categories. Over here, using the same data, but just with race on the X-axis and age as the color aesthetic, we're emphasizing the distribution of income across ages within a certain race. So slightly different messages there, but both work. Just depends on what you want to do. He went on to talk about stacked bar plots, which are useful for proportions of things. I don't have a image here, but I could go over here. Just a stacked bar plot like that. I guess they're not even proportions. I guess they are, at least the sizes of them. But stacked bar plots are another useful way, but they are to show amounts, but they are challenging in that the bars, like, it's a little more difficult to compare this height versus this height, but with a simple graph like this, he's included the numbers to make that a bit easier. And one way that I find I use a lot in my work to cram extra information into a series of bar charts is just to facet that information out into separate subplots, where you have bar plots with a simple, like a univariate bar plot, I guess only showing one categorical variable at a time. You have the age category on the X, and then you have different subgraphs for the different races. I guess that got included twice. And then the last chapter or the last section of this chapter talked about dot plots, which are another way to show amounts of things. They do not need to start at 0 for, I guess, reasons that are not immediately intuitive to me, but maybe if it is intuitive to anyone else, they could share with the group. But he says you don't need to start at 0 for dot plots. And that allows you to like zoom in on the range of data you're actually working with and emphasize differences. Here, Haiti is very obviously like the country with the lowest life expectancy. In this graph using bar plots, it's less clear, like it looks like there's less of a difference, but maybe this is just one of those areas where like graph designers can kind of torture the data to make differences look bigger or smaller depending on their goal. And one thing that I learned from this chapter is about heat maps like this, which I've never really used. I've seen them a few times. If I remember correctly, they are recommended when you have two categorical variables with many, many values for each category. Because instead of framing all of these as separate colors on separate axis groups, you arrange them on the X and the Y here, and you use color to represent the magnitude of your quantitative variable. It's a little more difficult to get like a precise value. How much does that orange represent? Somewhere around 80-ish. But it's useful when you have a lot of categories for both categorical variables, and it gives you some overall trends. But like with all these other graphs for showing amounts, the order in which you arrange things can affect the message. So that's all like the notes that I took from chapter 6. Chapter 7 will be a bit shorter, at least from my kind of revision of it. I want to pause there in case anyone has anything they really want to say about chapter 6 before we move on.
Yeah, so when I saw the graph that you had at the beginning with all the multiple bars, because you had like race, income, and age, the first thing I thought was, oh, that could be a great example for the last plot, the waffle plot or the heat map.
Yeah, yeah.
That is a perfect example because I love those plots, those heat maps. I love them. They are so visually appealing, but also I feel like when you have all of these categories, like you have here with those grouped bars, you really what you want to showcase. Well, it depends on the story that you want to tell, but I feel like it's not really focused on the amount for each group. It's more like trends comparing groups that you're interested in. So I feel like when you have this kind of data that has so many categories on two different categorical variables, then go with a heat map because then you're going to see the trend. And if you're more interested in obviously the value, the specific value of each one, then maybe you can go with the dot plot or the one with the points. Because I feel like here, especially with that color palette, you sort of like, I don't know, it's not easy to see, and then you really have to like work through what exactly it is that each one wants to show. So I don't know, that was just like the thought that I had. I feel like grouped and stacked bars have their place, but once you go into like too many categories, then just simplify the thing and just go with a heat map.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think, yeah, this graph could have served equally well, if not better, with a heat map. Uh, it'd be nice if there was some sort of like rule for like if you have
Mm.
more than this levels, go to a heat
Mhm.
map, but maybe that's too prescriptive, but throwing it out there in case anyone has like heard of a rule like that or a guideline.
I've never, but maybe someone else has. I think it's more, yeah, the message that you
Okay.
wanna, yeah.
Heat maps, uh, while we're gushing about heat maps, they truly feel like, to me,
Mhm.
almost more like in the art side of data visualization than like a bar plot. You know, a
Mhm.
bar plot seems very like nerdy and business intelligence, like, but a beautiful heat map is just so symmetric and colorful. I don't know. I'm a big fan. I just have never really used them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too. Or there's another one called waffle plots too, which is exactly the same thing, but well, there are some nuances there, but the squares are separated. They're not like all together. So it's more like when you see a waffle and it's like one hole here, but instead of a hole, it's like a little square. So those, I don't think he covers them in this book, but that's another one that it's a very simple graph, but I just love waffle plots. And
Okay.
that's gotten very popular. Let me see if I can find an example. They've gotten
Yeah,
very
please do.
popular in the last few years because again, we can do them in Python, in R, in Tableau, whatever software you have, and they're so aesthetically pleasing. Let me see. And I think, yeah, I've done that in ggplot, but I think there's also like a specific package to make them.
Oh yeah, looks like Arthur linked it GG Waffle.
Yeah, ggwaffle, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so let me put
Uh,
a few examples here. They're not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing. Actually I have one in my blog, but they're not the most but I'll put them just as an example. Where is my Zoom chat?
but it's the same idea where you have like two categorical variables and then you color aesthetic
Yeah,
the quantitative. Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very pretty.
More simple than a heat plot. It's way more simple. But again, you see amounts per category. So you don't have the quantitative variable necessarily because this is like you're counting how many events per category. Oh, but
Uh,
then you have one here. Yeah, I guess this one does have the quantitative one. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes,
it
I
is
know.
beautiful. But then
Yeah,
it's got like the height of the bar here is telling us something as well. Uh,
yeah.
so
So it's
it's like a bar plot,
it's a
but
bar
with
plot, but it's
waffles.
also giving you the number of events, maybe two. I'm not really sure exactly what each little waffle represents. I guess they should have mentioned that.
I'm sure maybe they
Each
do.
one is a cyclone, because it could be that each
Yeah,
one
like a weather event,
like a
whether it's a
weather event.
tropical wave,
Exactly.
tropical storm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. I did not think to include waffles and bar
No,
plots. So
don't
there
worry
you go.
because he didn't include them, the author. I've never seen it like this though, like the
Yeah.
one you have. I've only seen the other simple ones. Yeah, like that one. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. From the
super
GG
simple.
waffle
Yeah.
documentation.
And the other thing is, yeah, you can also make them like circles or
Yeah.
icons. I mean,
The now outdated Twitter
yeah.
bird. Um, cool. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful graphics. They really feel like they're getting more into that like data viz artistry space than just like pure, here's an answer to your business question kind of bar plot.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that I am still not fully comfortable with about this chapter is like, why can a dot plot axis start somewhere beside zero? And why, like, I think it makes sense to me why a bar plot would have to have a y or a categorical quantitative axis that starts at zero, but why that rule doesn't apply to dot plots.
I have never heard of that. I don't know. My dot plots always start at zero. I thought that was a
Okay.
thing.
Maybe I misread the author's uh, one important limitations of bars is that they need to start at zero, but then
because the bar length is proportional to the amount shown. Oh,
Okay. I guess there it is. I just glossed over it.
yeah, because I guess the point is just showing you an amount
Yeah, the
with
point
no,
doesn't need to be elongated. Okay, that makes sense.
oh, maybe that's
Okay,
why.
just needed a more careful rereading. Uh, okay, that's everything I needed to, uh, I felt I had to say about chapter 6. Does anyone have any other thoughts they'd like to add? Okay, welcome. You're welcome to kind of come back and bring up any thoughts on chapter 6 at the end. But we can move on to chapter 7 now. This one is all about visualizing distributions, mostly through histograms and density plots. Histograms are kind of like bar plots in the sense that they're bars and they have a quantitative variable on one of the axes. Histograms are basically a way to, they basically chunk up your quantitative data, such as age, into bins or groups. And then at that point, it's basically just a bar plot a bar plot with the y-axis or the quantitative axis being the number of observations within that group. So it's kind of like a special instance of a bar plot, at least the way I see it. But very useful in visualizing distributions. Here we can see that most people in this data set were like the median was around 125-ish years. We had ages of people extending from 0 all the way up to, I don't know, 70-ish. But most people were, I would say, like youngish, 20 to 30. So that's what a histogram does. It helps you to visualize a distribution. Histograms are, I think, like a pretty old way of visualizing distributions because you could easily bin data and then graph it. But now that we have fancier computers and they're more widely available, I suppose that histograms are being, or they at least have to share the space with density plots now. And a density plot looks something like this, where the distribution you are plotting, you do some like probability function that I'm not very knowledgeable about, but you're basically, I guess, modeling that distribution as if it came from a distribution of a certain kernel type. So the default kernel is Gaussian or normal. So if you use that, I think the assumption of the density plot you're creating is that your data come from a underlying Gaussian distribution. I think, and this is not necessarily written in the text, but from what I've heard, you have to be careful, for example, if you're mapping or if you're using a density plot for, say, like discrete quantities like counts, maybe something like a Poisson distribution where it's not normally distributed. I think at least that's the case. And that's less important as you have more and more observations. Because I suppose things approximate a Gaussian distribution when you have enough observations. But another issue with a density plot is that it implies the existence of data where none exist because you get this smooth curve. You think that you have ages at every single level here, when that might not be the case. One thing I've seen other people do and like seen out in the wild to get around that is to use rugs, these little like markers to show where you actually have a data point. So each line here shows where you actually had data. So you have these like kind of standard gaps between ages, I suppose, because I suppose the way this data collected, people didn't say I'm like 31.25 years. They said I'm 31. or I'm 32 or so on. So you have these gaps, but the density plot kind of implies that you have people who are, you have actual observational data on people who are 20.2 years, 50.7 years of age. The thing that I think is really awesome about density plots is that you can change the opacity or the transparency of the density plots, and you can overlay them to compare multiple distributions at the same time. This doesn't work as well for histograms. For the visuals aren't super interesting, but they're in the chapter if you want to go look at them. But basically, this is something that density plots offer over histograms, the ability to compare multiple distributions at the same time. Again, I think it's one of those areas where, like the heat map, it almost transcends kind of mundane data visualization and becomes very artistic. But yeah, those are density plots. So shorter chapter, shorter set of notes. Does anyone have thoughts, opinions, concerns that they would like to share? Does anyone who like works at a company or is like professionally engaged in data science, data analytics, do you find that your like colleagues ask for histograms or density plots a lot? I feel like I get asked for a ton of bar plots, but I've never been asked for like hey, can you show me the distribution of this? I think that probably tracks with a lot of people, but I'd be curious to hear if anyone has the opposite experience.
All bar plots all the time.
Yeah, okay. Yep, pretty same for me too.
Maybe not all the time, but too much.
It is the default plot in business. Yeah.
I kind of I'm still struggling with what should be the optimal. Forgive me for my voice. I just got some dental work done, so it may sound like slurred speech.
Coming through clear to me.
I'm still struggling a little bit with like the optimal kind of like visualization strategy for looking at quantities for deeply grouped data. So kind of like coming back to, I mean, heat map seemed like it was really nice, but I'm honestly wondering if there's probably situations where you're looking at so many groups that makes sense to have a table.
Yeah. Yeah. I am with you on that. I've been in situations where I have so many groups to show at the same time. And my solution, for better or worse, has been to like make it interactive, like through a Shiny app or a Power BI tool, and basically just put the onus of deciding what to look at on the user, so they could like filter to the exact combination of categories that they want to see, and then the plot would update. But I'm not wholly satisfied with that approach because it does feel like I'm just downloading the like effort to the user. But I'd be curious to see what other people have to say on that.
Well, I mean, what you said makes a lot of sense to me, honestly. I mean, if the medium permits it, so I'm more often than not working with static reports, so that's kind of off the table, regrettably.
Gotcha.
But I feel like there are lots of situations where people want to see a lot of data and there's no natural story. It's in a sense just like throw a bunch of data out there and then people will look at what they're going to look at. And that really seems like it's more table country for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Much as it pains me, I wish people could think about the story and just have
So you
some
mean
viz that
like
shows that story.
when it's more like an exploratory analysis, when you're like, let's see, like we are the initial stages of something, and we have all these variables, and we kind of want to see if there are trends or if there are things happening with the data. Is that kind of like where you are referring?
Um, Not really, but I think that would definitely be a use case for it. I'm seeing it more in sort of like you have a survey and you do a report on the survey and you just want to look at differences across groups for which you can produce estimates.
Mhm.
Um, and I think very often, you'll just have these visualizations that are these messy series of kind of grouped bar plots that really I think would have been more effective as a table because they become visually distracting since there's no well, often like no natural thing that let's say the author wants you to look at, regrettably. Um, uh, and I think I'd prefer in that case that there be a table and then people could kind of compare cells in the table at their leisure. Um, I mean, I would far prefer Josh's strategy. People could come to, let's see, like interactive report and then kind of like in the style of the New York Times, although maybe not as fancy, but you know, you come and you want to know something and you can kind of query the report and the report would offer up some kind of visualization that would help you look at the sliver of things that you're interested in.
I see, I see.
Might
There
actually
is
be kind
one
of
other.
fun. Sorry, just
Oh,
spitballing
please do.
ideas. Maybe do like take those first few graphs in section 6.2 and do a heat map makeover or something and just see how they looked. I think that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have a side-by-side kind of comparison. Um, there was one question I had. I think these are like maybe a newer kind of chart to me, but the lollipop chart, these aren't mentioned in the chapter, but I think of them as like in the bag of options for visualizing amounts. Maybe I'll just look into one quickly. Um, to me, basically, they're a bar chart or a bar chart, yeah, that uses lines for the bars and then they're capped with a dot plot. Or alternatively, they're a dot plot with a line extending uh, to the x-axis or to the categorical axis. But I've never really used them. I've never really found like a use case where I'm like, oh, this would be a perfect lollipop chart. I usually just stick with a bar plot if that's what my like requester has asked for.
Mhm.
But I want to know, do we have any lollipop chart fans, converts?
So I
Anyone?
think that with the lollipops, it's a different example than the dumbbell plots because the dumbbell plots, I do see the appeal on those.
Totally,
I think the
totally. Like something
lollipops
like
with the
this, right?
yeah,
That's what you
yeah.
think. Okay, yeah.
So the lollipops is exactly what you just described. I think it's that because we have moved from Excel essentially to other types of um, Python, Tableau, RStudio, all the other GUIs that can produce all these beautiful graphs. But I think it's the same thing, only dressed differently. But in
Yeah,
the end, the lollipop plot tells the same story as the bar plot. The only thing is that it maybe puts more emphasis on the dot, right? Like you really want to compare the amount that each category has. And then maybe that's where you want people to focus their attention on instead of the length of the bar. I guess maybe a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, I think it's the same story, right? It just
yeah.
looks modern compared to
Hmm.
a bar plot. But the dumbbell plots, now those tell a different story because I feel like those are for like beginning and end and compare
Yeah,
across groups. So those I like. I feel like the dumbbell plots are like are children from the lollipop
yeah,
plot. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. They're related.
yeah.
Yeah, these are beautiful as well. I rarely get a chance to make them, but yeah, I like them a lot too.
I
Mhm.
actually like the lollipops a little bit for cases where you've got lots of categories, and where I feel like it would just be overwhelming to see all the bars. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
good point. Lines are
I mean,
thinner than
I've not
bars.
used them that much, but I could see that as being a potential use case.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Ooh, also look at that one. Yeah, the one below that goes up and down. Oh, maybe that one is also a nice example, right? Instead of having bars going up and down, like Arthur just said. Oh, I like
Yeah.
that one.
Like, I guess you could do that with a bar plot as well, but it's just
But if it's too many,
too many. Yeah. But no, I like that. That's I will definitely keep that rule kind of in my back pocket if it.
Although I
Yeah,
do wonder,
manifests.
like, if you could scratch the same itch with just a dot plot. It might, I'm like, my intuition is it might be a little hard to trace I mean, if you get too many categories, it might be difficult to trace a dot back to its category label
Yeah,
without the
that's a good
line.
point.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other things I could think about with a dot plot were if you were to like, I deal with plotting like countries a lot of the time. And I've seen some ggplots or some graphics that use like, I guess they're like an emoji, a circular emoji of like the country's flag. If you had
Oh,
any sort of like circle-based icon corresponding to your categories, you could swap those in for the circles. I'm not sure if that would be good or bad, but it's something you could do.
mhm.
I also like this actually, where like you
Yeah.
can make the line a little thicker and the circle a little larger.
Mhm.
Kind of like in a bar plot when you would just like color the bar differently, but this is nice too.
Yeah, to emphasize certain categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think I like that too. There's also, I'm trying to remember, but in R, there is a package that you can use to sort of do this kind of thing where you have every category that you're not interested in. It's not highlighted with the color that you want or even with the thickness of the line that you want.
Mhm.
I am trying to remember, but I will go because I saw it in a different in the ggplot book club that we had last semester or a few months ago, and we saw that specific package. So I'll look in my notes and then put it in the in Slack. So for those of you
Sounds
that
good.
use R, you know that you can just also explore it because it does exactly this thing that you can also do it in ggplot, but you know it I mean the other one does it automatically. So.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. That's I think everything I had to talk about. Anyone have anything else they'd like to mention about 6 or 7? Okay. Is now
Yeah.
the time we write stop or end
Mhm.
or okay. All right. I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Okay.